In the years before buses and cars, phones and laptops, the rights of women and the liberty of slaves, back before the cure for smallpox and the rights to believe in different gods and no gods, further back than before the Crusades, where countries were invaded and people were forced to follow the will of the church or face being put to the sword for defiance, all the way back before even the time when the New Testament was put together and when Jesus was supposedly raised from the dead. There, according to the Hebrew Bible, also referred to as the Old Testament, lived a man called Moses. Born to a Hebrew mother in Egypt, Moses entered a world where the reigning Pharaoh had ordered that all Hebrew boys be killed. Quite the setup to this story, isn't it? However, during this mass murder of babies, Moses' mother managed to save her child by placing Moses on a basket. This basket floated down the river Nile and was found by none other than the servants of the Pharaoh's daughter. Quite convenient, one might say. Rather than kill Moses, it was decided that he would be raised as the son of the Pharaoh's daughter, and that his birth mother would work as a servant to help raise him. Also quite convenient. Very much so, in fact. As Moses grew up, he would have undoubtedly encountered oppression and abuse of the Hebrew people, and perhaps due to his reign as an acting prince of the Pharaoh's family, he would have played a part of it himself. But, moving on, the Bible goes on to say how Moses as an adult journeyed to find out how his Hebrew kin were doing. It was very soon when he came upon an Egyptian beating a Hebrew man. Outraged, Moses murdered the Egyptian in cold blood and buried the body in the hopes no one would learn of his crime. He thought he was in the clear, but then he found people were talking of his deed, so rather than face punishment, he fled. On a side note, this makes the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," not as great, as clearly murder was already met with punishment. Next in the story, Moses journeyed for a time before he ended up at a well. It was here where he rescued some women from some rude shepherds. He was then employed by the father of the women for doing so. Later, Moses married one of the father's daughters, and for 40 years he served as a shepherd. I'll say that again. For 40 years, Moses hid from his crime and allowed his Hebrew brethren to continue to suffer under the Pharaoh's wrath. A nice guy, truly. One uneventful day, while Moses was leading a flock of sheep up a mountain, as one does, he saw a bush on fire that wasn't being burned, and unlike most fiery bushes, this one spoke and told Moses he was the one true God, also giving his name as to what is pronounced Yahweh. Of course we know the God's a he because, well, there's actually no proof of this, nor is there any proof that he even existed, but that's another story. Let's move on. He told Moses to free his Hebrew brethren from oppression. But right when the God had selected Moses for this task, Yahweh decided he would kill Moses for having not performed genital mutilation on his son, known as circumcision to many. After that lovely deed, Moses was allowed to keep his life and he moved on, and along the way his brother Aaron decided to join Moses in his quest to save the Israelites. They sought audience with the Pharaoh and told him that Yahweh had commanded the Pharaoh to allow the Israelites to have a celebratory feast in the wilderness. The Pharaoh declined. The next time Moses spoke with the Pharaoh, Moses made a rod turn into a serpent. One would suggest this work of the devil, but it didn't matter, as apparently the Pharaoh had magicians that could also turn rods into serpents. It makes one wonder about the significance of these serpents in relation to the serpent in the Garden of Eden. After that, Moses continued with the set of 10 plagues. The first was to turn the river Nile into blood, the second to overrun Egypt with frogs, the third to spread lice everywhere, the fourth was to spread a swarm of flies, or also thought to be wild animals, across Egypt. The fifth was disease, the sixth was boils, the seventh was a hailstorm, the eighth a plague of locusts, the ninth was 3 days of darkness, and the 10th, which I have to say is probably the most vile thing to do, was that all firstborns should die. So, after a flurry of destructive curses, Moses goes on to kill firstborn people, apart from those who live in houses marked by sheep's blood. I repeat that, a multitude of people die at the hands of Moses. Naturally, this was because the Pharaoh had not released the Israelites from their slavery, and it is said Moses gave the Pharaoh every opportunity to back out from his negative response. But still, such violence is rather scary. Ultimately, slavery is wrong, but why should random innocents have to pay for that? Surely the true authoritarian in this is the Pharaoh. Why not go after the Pharaoh himself? Well, anyway, Moses got what he wanted, and he was able to leave Egypt with his brethren in tow. Rather disgruntled about all this, the Pharaoh decided to follow with an army, but he was later foiled by drowning in the hands of Yahweh. Mass murder apparently solves everything. Well, after that adventure of murder and martyrdom, Moses and his crew wandered around for 40 years, leaving no archaeological evidence of any kind that they had traversed the area, and then eventually Moses is summoned to the same mountain where he saw Yahweh as a burning bush. There he spends 40 days and 40 nights waiting on the 10 Commandments. Once he has them, he goes back to his brethren and is shocked to find they have moved on from his teachings to worship a golden calf. Outraged, as we know Moses can be, he smashed the stone tablets and led an onslaught to kill approximately 3,000 people to set them all right. No forgiveness, no tolerance, no love, just violence. As a side note, he probably had to smash the stone tablets so he could kill people without the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," getting in the way. Once the bloody deed was out the way with, Moses spent another 40 days and 40 nights to get new stone tablets and tell everyone about the 10 Commandments of God. Murder is now not okay. There are multiple variations of the 10 Commandments, and some have as many as 50 or more. And there have been a few tweaks over the years, but overall this list of commandments has the general essence of them. Number 1, thou shalt not have any of the gods before me, which shows just what this God cared about firstly, that you did not worship anything else. He didn't care about you, he cared about him. These next 2 prevent anyone from being able to criticize the religion in any way. Number 2, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. And number 3, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Number 4 is another good one. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, a requirement that you must not work on this day and instead devote your time to worshipping God. Well, it takes 4 commandments just to get here, and it's a pity that there isn't a commandment that prevents child rape, which the Catholic priest could have done with, but nevertheless, there's a bit of sense to these next few. Number 5, honour thy father and thy mother. Number 6, thou shalt not kill. Moses forgot this a few times. Number 7, thou shalt not commit adultery. Number 8, thou shalt not steal. Number 9, thou shalt not bear false witness to thy neighbour. And number 10, thou shalt not covet. Of course, it probably doesn't need to be mentioned that failure to follow any of these is to be stoned to death. No tolerance, no forgiveness, just violence. Absolute morality has never been sweeter. The story of Moses gets worse and worse, and Moses yet again has to kill people to solve problems. But, fortunately, it is incredibly unlikely that any of it even occurred, since no evidence has been found of the events that took place. Just like much of the rest of the Bible, it is just a dark, bloody, fictitious story of murder, slaughter and tyranny. And this same book is passed on to children everywhere. Good job.